Good afternoon. Welcome to the special meeting of the Franklin County Planning Commission. We have a limited agenda this evening. There's only one item on the agenda related to Hickman Hill Road. If you're here for that purpose, you're in the right place. If you're not, I would suggest you might want to check your calendar to see where it is that you should be. We're going to kind of take a moment to make sure that everyone who wishes to be heard is heard, but before that, the first thing I need to do is introduce to the membership of the commission a new appointee made by the city commission this week, Mr. Brent Swager, who quite frankly was a part of the commission in years past. We want to welcome him back to the commission and look forward to his input in our deliberations. And as part of that, I want to remind the commission that we have a process that we typically follow when a member of the commission leaves, and that is we recognize their contribution to the work of the commission by providing them with a small memento of their service. So at this point, we'll direct staff to please order a small plaque from Mr. Jim Terrell, who is rotating off of the commission, recognizing his contribution to the Planning Commission.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Now, what we need to do is take a couple of minutes at this moment and ask that if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against this item, to please come and sign the papers here on the front so that we will be able to recognize you when the time comes and ensure that those who wish to speak have an opportunity to do so. So we'll take a few moments at this time. If you have not signed, please come and sign if you wish to speak.
This is for and this is against.
Yeah, for the zone change
Yeah, if
or
you're,
against the zone.
yes.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm good, how are you two?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Now, I'm reminded that just because you sign the paper, you don't have to speak. It does not mandate that you speak. However, I'm also reminded that if your name is not on the paper, you can't come sign up later.
Let me just print it for you.
Just say scribble, whoever scribbles.
It's
I mean, I got you.
I was laughing because I was thinking, how come the city functions agree with this county?
Are you the eyeball guy?
I represent, yes, ma'am. Oh, he told me I did, so I'm happy to do either way. Yeah, I can do either way.
Six city people, it's wrong.
It's just in case.
I am happy to
Just keep thinking,
or not, you know, however you all direct.
Well, yeah, that's the stuff that I couldn't figure it out.
I was in a meeting yesterday in Louisville, and I still have, I had my strokes, some confusion, and so but I said,
Tell me what I got.
I'm confused.
Tell me what I got.
That I've worked with.
I've worked with for years, yeah.
One is the
They got
attorney.
the
Okay.
bad feeling.
And 9. So they're on the against is on the tail end, so. Okay, the way the list is playing out, it would be in all of our best interest if we assign a time frame for both sides to have to present their case. And it appears that if we award 1 hour to each side, doesn't mean that each side has to take an hour. But we just want to be able to fit everyone in and allow you to divide it up any way you wish. So that gives us 2 hours to complete or less. Okay? For everyone's information, although we're meeting in person, please be cognizant of the CDC guidelines and the suggestions of the governor as it relates to mouth and nose coverings. Also, this meeting will be shown over the plant board's, I think it's YouTube and other social media. Just so you know that people outside of the room are watching and listening to what is being said or not said. And with that, we'll ask the secretary to please call the roll.
David Boggs,
Present.
Patty Cross,
Here.
Keith Lee,
Here.
Paul Looney, Timothy Lusher,
Here.
William I. May,
Here.
Darrell Sanderson,
Here.
Charles Stewart, Brent Swager,
Here.
Russell Wright, Sharon Jackson.
Here.
Quorum of 7.
Is Keith on
There
Oh,
being no other.
Sorry, quorum of 8.
Okay. There being no other items, we will ask that the applicant please, well, are you gonna swear these, swear them before?
If you're going to testify at the meeting tonight, you'll need to stand and raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right. And we'll ask the applicant to please come forward to present the application.
Mr.
If you
Chairman.
state your name and address for the record, please, and you may begin.
All right, Mr. Chairman, my name is Nathan Billings. I'm with Billings Law Firm in Lexington, 145 Constitution Street. My understanding is staff has some comments to perhaps start before the applicant presentation. Briefly is what I understand from Michaela.
Did you want me to go first?
No, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, it's my pleasure to represent KT Holdings tonight before you. I appreciate all of the people in the audience being here this evening and showing up, and all of your attention this evening. I have set a timer on my phone at 40 minutes, understanding the chair's pleasure of timing, so I would like to reserve the end of my time for rebuttal if necessary. Mr. Tracy is also here tonight in the audience as well. With that, I have a presentation to go through, and I'd like to move for the admission of the presentation into the record of this matter, as well as the staff report, the application, and the notices that are in the staff's office. This zone change, as you all are aware, it's been before you a couple times before the special meeting tonight, is for property located out on the eastern corner of the county. And as you all know, KRS 100 requires notice to be given before any zone change hearing, and the special meeting tonight is called just to make sure that we have complied with the notice requirements. So just as a matter of housekeeping, I wanted to begin to make sure that I did confirm with Mr. Hewitt today that notices were posted on the property, photos have been taken. He's confirmed that notices were properly mailed to the certified mailing list. So that issue is hopefully resolved, and the issue is in the record for the commission at this point. The property involves 55.172 acres. That's slightly revised from the original application, which has been a concern through the process. The current zoning, as you all know, is RA large lot residential, and we're proposing to move to Ag or AG district. The current use of the property, although it was rezoned in 2010 to RA, has been and continues to be agricultural use for 11 years. I'll deal a bit later with that legal issue, but that makes it a non-conforming use under the existing zoning. Our proposed use of this under the zone change requested for you to vote on tonight is to make it agriculture, which conforms to the current use of the property. Staff has recommended approval. As you also know, due to the conflicts of interest rules, this matter was referred over to the Bluegrass Area Development District for preparation of handling of the file and as a staff report. And staff has prepared a very thorough and complete report that each of you all has seen and had time to review. It's very thorough, very exhaustive, with a number of exhibits as well. Staff has found, we agree, that the proposed amendment to agriculture is in agreement with the comprehensive plan as a whole. Specifically, they make reference to the 7 goals and objectives and specifically call out certain policies that are satisfied by the proposed zone change. Notably, the zoning of the property, although it would change, the use of the property would not change, which makes it a little unusual. For our practice, I actually represent about 50% of my time is working with developers or applicants, and the other 50% of my time is actually working with homeowner associations, neighborhood associations, et cetera, as objectors. So I have the pleasure or displeasure, depending on how you want to view it, that I actually sit on both sides of this, which it makes our firm practice in land use a little bit unique. In 15 years of land use, I cannot recall a situation where owners or neighbors were against what I would call a downzoning of the property. In other words, a zoning that decreases the intensity of the use of the property. Doesn't say they don't have a right to object, but I've never been involved in hundreds of land use cases where a proposed use would lead to a decrease of intensity where homeowners have objected. Specifically, we believe that the RA zoning is inappropriate and the proposed ag zoning is appropriate for a number of reasons, which the staff report has exhaustively gone through, and I hope to detail to you tonight. Probably most importantly, as you all may have realized from both the staff report and the attachments to the staff report, is that the infrastructure that would be required to develop this property to rural, residential, large lot A, or even as the comprehensive plan recommends, which is even further density, is that that infrastructure is not in place. There are no current plans to put it in place. There's no funding to put it in place. And in fact, that use of the property would actually cause many of the very things which I believe certain objectors have at least sent emails in opposing and speak to tonight. For example, more traffic. For example, more cars. For example, heavy equipment. The very things that some of the objectors don't want would be required if this were to be developed into large lot single family or even further upzoned into a higher density use. So the way I view this case is really, unlike a lot of zone changes, which wants to take farmland and zone it into a higher intensity use that is not currently there. This zone change is really about taking a current use and changing the zoning to fit the current use. That's unusual, but that's what we're talking about. Specifically, with respect to your findings tonight, there are 2 things to look at under KRS 100-213. And that is, the law requires that a zone change be approved if the proposed map amendment is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, or in the alternative, and both of these are present in this case, or in the alternative, even if it's not in conformity with the comprehensive plan. If the existing zoning is inappropriate, for example, like here, where infrastructure is not in place, and the proposed zoning is appropriate, where again is here, it's appropriate because of the use of the property, KRS 100-213 is satisfied. For context of the property, you'll see, I think you all probably have a general familiarity of where this is, if not even a very specific familiarity. It's out on Leestown Road, close to the county. It's north of Leestown Road. Here's the blow-up of the property. It has a weird boundary because of other subparcels over lots of time. Most recently, this bottom parcel here and these residential lots here have been parceled off into basically RA 1.5 acre plus lots. And some of the, I think these owners are some of the objectors to this case, as well as people from the neighborhood across the street. This is the current plat of the property. This is the most recent plat in the chain of title of the record in the public records in the county clerk's office that shows the boundaries of the property. I've sort of used red arrows to highlight that. And you'll see here where the last area of lots were subdivided off from that plat. That was in 2019. This is the updated survey. The last revision of this by the engineer, Mr. Smith, was on July 1st. And that resulted in the very, very slight discrepancy of acreage and one of the new notices that was sent out, just to make sure as a matter of law, because it's a contentious zone change, that there is no discrepancy between the original application acreage and the one that the notice was sent out in the application this evening. Specifically, when we look at the property, which I'll circle with my mouse here, the property to the north is used agriculture. Property to the east, its use is agriculture. Property to the south is used agriculture. In fact, the only thing that is not bounded by its agriculture is a public right-of-way, Hickman Hill, and 2 lots here in their backyards, and the 5 lots right here. So essentially, 85% of the boundary of this property is bordered by properties that continue to be and have been agriculturally used. Basically, only 5 residential lots are adjacent to the property, and those lots are zoned R1A, RA, so they are 1.5 acre or larger. This is a picture of the current use of the property. You'll probably hear some more about this roadway later on. It's not 55 foot wide. It's not 45 foot wide. The road's not 25 foot wide. It is a gravel road that's been rocked in to access the property by the current owner. But you can see from the pictures, and I'm going to go flip through a couple of these. Clearly, this property has one use right now. It is agriculture. In fact, one of the objector letters, that this person may speak later on, but one of the objector letters noted that they have lived in the subdivision across the street for, I believe, 30-some years, and that they have always remembered this property to be agriculture. I appreciate that evidence, and in fact, we have no evidence to the contrary. It has always been agriculture, going back hundreds of years. And the problem is, although it was rezoned in 2010, for various reasons, not all of which I know, but I know some of them, is that the property is basically inappropriate to be tried to develop the entirety as RA lots. You have road frontage access issues, you have sewer issues, you have water issues, you have fire hydrant issues, all of which the technical review committee members have spoken to, and their reports or their letters are in the file for you. So coming to the legal standards, so this is the most important thing for you all as the commission. You all have heard this, probably, you should have heard this every time a zone change, and you all are probably intimately familiar with the standard. And I read this earlier, but this is really, really important. And I would ask that you not lose sight of this tonight through either my discussion or through other presenters' discussions tonight. And that is the question is this. It must agree with the comprehensive plan, or the existing zoning is inappropriate, the proposed zoning is appropriate, or there's other changes. The third one, we're not arguing tonight, so that's not applicable to your discussion. But the first two are. And specifically, you may hear questions or comments or argument or purported evidence from objectors tonight. But the question that I would ask you all to consider when you hear that evidence or that argument or that story or that point is that relevant to looking at the comprehensive plan? How is that position or their belief or why they bought their property or what they think the property should be used by? How does that fit into the comprehensive plan? Because KRS 100 doesn't say. You base a zone change based on what the next door neighbor bought their property with the expectation of what would happen, because there's no guarantee of that under Kentucky law. You don't look at what they are afraid might happen with the property. And notably, there is no requirement that, at least in Franklin County, different counties have some different rules regarding subdivision regulations and zoning ordinances, but that an applicant set forth a detailed plan for everything they're going to do with the property. And to do that would actually be, I think, error for the Planning Commission, because the question is not, what is the specific use of the property? The question is whether the zoning uses under that category are appropriate under the comprehensive plan. We'll submit to you tonight, it's been agriculture. Even after the zone change, it continued to be agriculture. Tonight, it's agriculture, and we're asking you to say it's going to be agriculture in the future. It's very, very simple. When we come and deal with the existing zoning or the comprehensive plan, the same analysis fits both of those legal criteria. So, in summary, and I'm going to ask you all, give you a motion later on with proposed findings to do this, we're going to ask you to find that the proposed rezoning of the property is in agreement with the comprehensive plan. And we're going to ask you alternatively to find that the proposed rezoning is appropriate because the current zoning is inappropriate for multiple reasons and the proposed zoning is appropriate. I want you all to think about a couple definitions tonight as we talk through this presentation and you hear objectors. And that is, what is agriculture? Staff report showed you a definition of agriculture under Kentucky law, under KRS 100. So you have reference to that in the staff report. I've also brought in the definition from your zoning ordinance, which is simply the use of land for farming, dairying, pasturage, animal, poultry husbandry, if I can spit that word out, and other similar uses, and necessary accessory uses. Whereas rural residential density, which is the current one of the current zoning of the property, is single-family residential with a acreage size limit or minimum size limit. But notably, it says this: all rural residential densities are compatible with any agricultural land use. Now, I looked through the zoning ordinance and I looked through the comprehensive plan, and this phrase I'm going to tell you all is not in there. But I think this sentence includes or encompasses what that means. An RA lot is appropriate next to an agricultural zone. In other words, rural residential lot development, whether it's A like it is now or smaller lot sizes, next to agricultural use, which is exactly what we're going to ask you to do tonight, is permissible and in fact compatible under the zoning ordinance. Under the zoning ordinance, this is what we're asking you to do. This is the new zone of the property. This district, I'm going to read it, is intended to recognize agricultural land, so I defined agriculture a minute ago, which established regulations to emphasize agricultural production and preserve rural character, which is a key theme in your comprehensive plan from 2016, preserving rural character where possible. General intended uses, the raising of crops, livestock, forestry, hunting, game preserves, and ancillary services next to that. And there's a use table that I have an electronic format, but you probably have the zoning category for that. And accessory uses. Accessory means it's not primary; it's only secondary or ancillary to the primary use. And conditional uses, but conditional uses are only allowed if what? If you ask for the conditional use with the zone change, so we're not asking for any conditional uses, or you still got to come back and go through a totally different process to the Board of Adjustment. We don't have any conditional use requests, but that's what the zoning ordinance says. Further, under the ag, you can build single-family residential lots under the agricultural district. The lot size changes to 5 acres instead of 1.5. You have to have 200 feet of road frontage, which, if you can imagine this site, is a challenge because while it has a large boundary, very little of it actually fronts a public right-of-way unless we build a road essentially through the middle of the property to access the back in a cul-de-sac fashion. And then there's other setbacks that I don't know that have a lot of applicability, but they're here in the record now. So we believe that there are basically 5 reasons why our proposed map amendment tonight is in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Staff report outlays those. Second is we actually look at the comprehensive plan. 3 is we're going to look at the future land use maps. 4, there's other considerations, one of which involves non-conforming uses and Kentucky law, what it has to say about it. And then the third parties who are the technical people, the water plant board, or the electrics, gas, Columbia Gas, fire hydrants. All of those people said this is appropriate. There's no objection. The zone change to agricultural is acceptable. Staff recommended approval. As you all know, this is a case where it was referred to Bluegrass Ad for a very, very thorough investigation and very, very thorough report. This was, just from my reading, this took about an hour to read through, so I can imagine you all spent lots of time reading, not just once, but probably sections of it 2 or 3 times. They have recommended that the current zoning is inappropriate for a number of reasons set forth in the in the report and that the zoning is appropriate. In summary, they find that there's insufficient existing infrastructure. The way we phrase this is development is premature here because the property where it's situated doesn't have the infrastructure necessary to develop this either into residential 1.5 acre lots in a rural character or more intense use of the property through smaller lots. And I think this is critical and it's unusual to see this in a zoning in central Kentucky, which is Franklin County actually has excess residential housing capacity or land available for that housing capacity today. And specifically, staff did a very thorough job, if you read the report, of going back through the 2016 comprehensive plan, looking at the proposed population increases in both 2019 and 2020, looking at the actual population studies that were done, and finding that the population studies actually exceeded what was projected, but more than sufficient land exists for 50,000 more units inside of the area that could be rezoned for residential. What that means is you will have excess capacity for residential development. And this is not one then where you need to keep land being zoned for residential. You can actually revert the zoning back to agriculture to accomplish, to meet, to satisfy other goals of the comprehensive plan, like the importance of farming, the importance of agriculture, context for rural property. So we think, and we submit to you all, that the zoning that we're proposing is appropriate because the existing use and the proposed zoning is exactly the same. It's consistent with 75+% of the property around this. And while it is surrounded in part by several RA lots, those lots under the zoning ordinance say they're compatible with agricultural uses next to them. Going through the staff report and the comprehensive plan, I'm not going to read each goal or each of the objectives. What I'm going to do is tell you staff found all of these things in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Goal 1, staff findings positive. The property locks access to the public sewers, etc. Goal 2, multiple policies under Goal 2 regarding the preservation of existing farms, preservation of rural character, to distinguish between town and country. And basically, if you look on the road here, on the western side of this road is a residential development. On the north of this road are 2 large farms. On the east of this road is a large farm and several residential, large-scale, 1.5 acre plus lots. Staff, again, with Goal 2 found that this was satisfied. Goal 3, use infrastructure as planning, which means you review available infrastructure and you evaluate whether that infrastructure is sufficient to meet the proposed development or not. It's not. Staff found this goal, again, is satisfied because infrastructure is not present. Goal 4, promoting economic growth. This is one where agriculture promotes economic development, while the development of houses is an economic development tool. It also in itself has a limited economic development tool because once you build the house, the cost for in that house are then done, whereas agriculture exists after that point in time. So there's probably a counterpoint to that, that any use of the land which has an economic benefit can be made. You're also going to hear, or you may hear tonight, comments about commercial use of the property. And that was in some of the emails I read from owners. I don't know what the word commercial use means in those emails. I know that the comprehensive plan doesn't distinguish commercial uses because agriculture is a commercial use. Commercial use is a broad term. The question is not whether it's a commercial use because farming is a commercial use. Livestock is a commercial use. Growing corn is a commercial use. The question is what is the type of commercial use? It's not being proposed as office. It's not going to be proposed as retail. It's not industrial, which are also commercial uses. The building of houses is commercial use. So if the word commercial is used later on, I think you all should evaluate what does that mean within context, because there is nothing in the zoning ordinance regarding a commercial use as a zoning category, and the comprehensive plan doesn't look at commercial use either in that context. Again, staff found Goal 4 is there. Goal 5, protecting environmental health. Obviously, When you limit the property from being developed, you are preserving rural character, you are not affecting stormwater runoff, you're not affecting water quality, water pollution. Staff again found that was met. Goal 6, preserving existing neighborhoods. One of the concerns that I read in the emails was that the development of this property into anything other than its current use would increase traffic along the road. I would agree with that. And you have a very thriving subdivision just to the west. If you built houses on here, theoretically, under a 54-acre tract with 1.5 acres apiece, you have to back out your acreage for roadways. You could build approximately 30-plus single-family houses on this property. Okay. So you think then 30 houses added on the road, the number of trips per day exceeds 6 to 8, depending on which traffic manual you're going to use. So you're actually increasing the use, the transportation use of the road, if you were to develop it into the existing zoning. Again, staff found that preserving existing neighborhoods is met by preserving the agricultural character next to the RA lots, which limits traffic to the neighborhood to the west. As you also know, there are 2 farms to the north, and Happy Jack's has multiple things a year where they have lots of traffic in and out. So you add a neighborhood development on this property under the current zoning, and you're going to only compound those traffic issues. Goal 7 talks about enhancing community quality and character. Again, staff found that any development of this property would be subject to those regulations set forth in the subdivision regs, and that those things would increase the use of the property, which could decrease the community quality and character. So that's sort of staff's overall findings, which you all, I'm sure, have read and got more detail of. One of the other things that staff noted, why the existing zoning is inappropriate, is on pages 5 to 8 regarding the definition of suburban residential or suburban residential neighborhood, because those terms are actually used inconsistently in some of the documents, which sometimes happens. But the zone change was over a decade ago. The comp plan was adopted 5 years ago. And since that time, the property still hasn't developed for some reason, which shows, we believe, is evidence that whatever the zoning happened a decade ago is inappropriate, because it hasn't resulted in the intended use of the property that the Planning Commission approved 11 years ago. In fact, the use of the property has stayed exactly the same before that zone change, since that zone change, and since the comprehensive plan. Page 13 talks about the future land use element, and that there are often comments, and staff even has a comment here about the future land use map being a central piece of evidence, and we agree with that. But some people often look at the future land use map as the only evidence with respect to whether a zone change is appropriate. And this future land use map, it is well settled in Kentucky law, is not the sole factor. It is only a factor in determining whether or not the zoning is appropriate. Specifically, if you look here, its currently land use map is suburban residential. So here's the definition of that. Single-family homes, higher intensity uses, and again, here's this word, commercial developments, open spaces, parks, sidewalks, connectivity. Well, there's nothing to connect to here. You've got farms on 3 sides, and access to transportation alternatives. You don't have readily available connectivity to retail. You don't have readily available, outside of infrastructure, to transportation other than a car, to bike paths, things like that. Staff looked at the development guidelines, and when you look at these criteria as well, under this, if you look through these rules, I think what you're going to find is development of this property would not be appropriate. So for example, a new development should occur in areas where water and sewer are served by public agencies and can meet additional demand. You've seen the TRC comments that say it's not currently served by sewer, and they don't have any plans to do it. It's not currently served by adequate fire hydrants, and those would have to be improved. It's not currently served by sufficient water lines to be developed. We sort of talked about 1, 2. Provide flexibility in the design and intensity to create land use transitional areas. You've got a farm to the south, a farm to the north, a farm to the east. If you were to make this 30 residential lots, we don't believe that's a transitional area. We believe that the existing RA lots that exist to the southeast and to the west of this property provide that transition between right-of-ways and the farming land that includes this property and the others. Going on, you talk about one of the development guidelines is to increase or promote interconnectivity. This property would not interconnect with anything because basically everything that surrounds it, again, is either other large-scale agricultural farming operations or there are other 1.5 acre plus or minus lots that are not appropriate for other public right-of-way infrastructure or trails or walkways or things like that, or green spaces. It also talks about the development of attached housing and multifamily should be encouraged. Well, this is not an appropriate site for multi-housing. At best, it would be single-family 1.5 acre lots. And then promote the development of convenient retail uses. That, again, is not appropriate here. So when you look at the development guidelines under that criteria, those aren't met. All of these are factors that show that the existing zoning of RA is not appropriate for this property. Going on, staff also notes some of the things from the zoning ordinance regarding the full range of community facilities. It talks about the subdivision regulations requiring potable water, the water we talked about, and then adequate sanitary sewer service, which also is not available at this site. We talked about how the land use map, the future land use map, is not the sole criteria, and in fact, the comprehensive plan itself recognizes this on page 23 in section 4, where it says it's to provide guidance for decision making. Again, it's not the sole criteria. And it says that the land use plan, as part of the total comprehensive plan, not just the map, has to have a realistic yet flexible interpretation. So we do believe that Kentucky law and the comp plan are in conformity with each other. And this is the law that you can rely upon that tells you you don't have to look at just the comp plan future land use map. In fact, it's error to only look at that map. It says that it's not required, the commission is not required to grant or deny it based only on it. The commission must consider the entire comprehensive plan. Sometimes people say, well, the map says X, so it has to be X. Again, the map is an evidence, but it is not the only evidence. You have to look at the entire comprehensive plan. It serves as a guide, not a straitjacket. Other criteria that wasn't in the staff report that I want to highlight in goal 1, policy 1, talks about while growth is healthy and growth can be necessary, it should also be managed by review of the comprehensive plan. And the map amendment we're proposing complies with the comprehensive plan. Goal 2, policy 8. We want to avoid urban sprawl. I've heard that term lots of times. We're preserving the distinction between rural character, rural landscape, and a suburban environment. Again, the roadway serves as a very defining line between a high-intense residential area. You have RA lots that exist, and you would have, which would serve as a buffer between the continuing agricultural use of this property and others. Goal 7, policy 2, support and enhance rural gateways. You all know, and this is just an example, is Happy Jack Farms to the north of that. As you go through that, you already have a bunch of houses to the left. When you continue to build houses on the right, it starts to detract from the rural character that other farmers want to have on their properties. Also, when you look at the comprehensive plan, the staff report, this property actually has significant statewide soils, both prime farmland and farmland soils of statewide importance. And the building of residential lots on there is a risk to that property. The comprehensive plan speaks to the importance of trying to preserve those areas of important soils for agricultural use. And the staff report, I think, accurately reflects, actually, I'm sorry, not the staff report, the comprehensive plan speaks, when you read through it, about how development in Franklin County has actually used a lot of this property, the statewide soils, farms with statewide soils of importance for development, because they tend to be in areas that are flat, they tend to be larger farms, and so they tend to be developed or have been developed in the past. So again, another reason to preserve the farmland. Other criteria under Kentucky law, whenever possible, non-conforming uses shall be eliminated. It's ironic that the leading case on this is from 1965. It's the Franklin County Planning Commission. versus the Shelby County Lumber Company. In that case, it involved a non-conforming use on property, and at that time, the state Supreme Court said, when you have a non-conforming use of the property, you need to eliminate those. A non-conforming use is defined in KRS 100-111, and a non-conforming use is an activity that lawfully existed before the adoption of the zoning category it currently is. It continues on past the rezoning, but it doesn't conform to those regulations. So in other words, it's a permissive, but it's an illegal use. That's what non-conforming means. And the case law says, doesn't say the statutes, the case law says, to the extent you can, you should bring non-conforming uses to conforming uses. You will have the chance to do that tonight by taking a non-conforming existing use agriculture and rezoning the property to be agriculture to remove a non-conforming use. And basically there's two ways to do get rid of non-conforming uses. One is you stop the use and you change it to something else that complies, or you change the zoning to what the use is. And we're asking for the second tonight. So at the end, staff has lots of recommendations. I'm not going to read back through them, other than to say staff has recommended approval of this. We agree with the staff report. I think that we go farther than the staff and said we also believe that the zone change is appropriate under the comprehensive plan. In other words, it's in agreement with the comprehensive plan. Staff has found that the existing zoning given to the property is inappropriate and that the proposed zoning is appropriate, which we agree with. We think you don't have to go to this section. You can actually find that it's in agreement with the comprehensive plan. I'm going to skip over some of the recommendations. So staff recommends the following findings of fact. The existing zoning given to the proposed property is inappropriate, and that the rezoning to AG is appropriate, and that the population growth has surpassed the anticipated population at the adoption of the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval. At this time, may I approach, Mr. Chairman? May I approach? I have a proposed. I have a proposed motion for the consideration of the commission with proposed findings that, should you all believe it appropriate, and I hope you do, the motion is prepared for you all to.
Did you share with?
That it would be appropriate for the commission to review this, to make a motion based upon it and the findings proposed therein, which would support the rezoning of the property. In summary, I know there's a lot of people here who are objecting tonight, which is not unusual when you have a large crowd for a zone change. That's typically why you have a large crowd, is because you have objectors. When people are in favor of it, they don't show up. They just assume it'll get passed. But I do want to point out the number of parties who have not objected. This includes the road department, the plant board for the water area, for electric, for telecom, the health department, the sewer district, fire department, AT&T, Columbia Gas. All the TRC recommended approval. Staff's recommended approval. We're asking you to approve it. It is an agreement with the 7 goals and the policies of the comprehensive plan. The use of the property remains unchanged, and in fact, we think helps promote and foster the goals of the comprehensive plan. So therefore, it's an agreement with the comprehensive plan. Further, the current zoning is inappropriate because of its current use and the lack of infrastructure, and the proposed AG zone would be appropriate in the alternative. With that, I'm happy to take questions now from the commission, or depending on how your process works.
We'll work through that. There's one other thing that we need to do. We had some left over. Could you please provide the Bluegrass Ad staff with a copy of?
May I approach you, get them, and I'll pass them out?
I'd rather them have it now.
Yes.
He was just asking if you can come up and
Say
get it.
yes.
I was going to pass them to them.
No, I'd rather them have it now.
It's down there. He
Yeah. That-
He's just asking permission if he can come up and get it.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Sorry.
As an attorney, you never approach the dais until you have permission from the chair. So that's what I was going to give it to him now.
Come on, man.
And I had, just for the chair's reference, I had actually emailed this to them earlier today as well. So they did get a copy of it.
Jackson, before we get off on that, you're speaking about questions. I believe that there are individuals that are represented by opposing counsel, and I think we ought to see if they have any questions on cross-examination.
Yes, sir. At this moment, does any commission member have a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sway.
Okay. Thanks for your testimony tonight. I have actually a series of questions, and I'm just trying to better understand the case and why you're here. Let me just start off by asking, how long has the applicant owned the land? And it doesn't have to be a precise number, just a ballpark. How long?
Since last fall.
Okay. And when was that road constructed, and why was it constructed? Because it looks new.
It is fairly new. It's been constructed within the last probably 2 months. And there was an encroachment permit necessary from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet to install that road. It's allowed essentially by right when you have a farm property. And I guess we use the word road. It's on a single parcel of land, so it's a gravel road through a property. It's not a designated right of way. It's not constructed to any public standards because it's not intended to be a dedicated right of way at this time. It's not intended to be a public road or an easement. It's a farm road.
Okay. And I'm kind of curious, just because I think you said that there was somebody that said that they have seen this as agricultural use for the last 30 years, and continued agriculture. I'm kind of curious on why you would need to construct a new road in there.
Mr.
I mean,
Chairman, we're here on a zone map amendment, not a development plan. And Mr. Swigert needs to address those questions if there's a development plan that comes before us.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll continue
Yeah.
Mr. Swigert's questioning, and I think I can address it
Okay.
succinctly. It's not, the question's really not about the road. You mentioned something early in your testimony. I appreciate the very exhausted presentation, but on the other hand, that does bring red flags, because as you mentioned, this is just a decrease in density, and in your 15 years, you've never seen this much opposition. I apologize, I can only speak as loud as I can speak.
Get that microphone.
See if the mic,
There you go.
Is this up any?
That's
All
better,
right.
sir. Thank you.
That helps.
There you go.
What I mentioned was that this is an exhaustive presentation for what should be a very simple zone map amendment, which does lead to a lot of questions. You mentioned early on that, and you pointed out that we should not consider the intended use. I would feel that there are many people in this audience that would disagree with you, because ultimately, while ag is ag, it's not in Franklin County. There are other uses that be grouped under agriculture other than the raising of crops and livestock. So I'll ask you very specifically, as you mentioned today, it's crops. You've never mentioned in the future what that will be. What is the intended use?
Anything that's permitted within the agricultural zone.
So it could be a mental institution.
I don't know that I know if a mental institution is permissible under the ag zoning or not. My understanding would be that that would probably not be the case, but I'd have to review the zoning in more detail. I don't believe that's one of the structured developments that allows that to occur.
Do you hear this?
Yeah, it's a conditional use.
It's a conditional use.
Yeah. It's a conditional use, yes, but that's why I said
But-
earlier, we're not asking for any conditional uses this evening.
At this time.
That's correct. And if there are conditional uses, there are due process protections in place that would require the applicant to file a new application with new notices and a new public hearing before the Board of Adjustment before that use could ever be undertaken.
Right, but there are also permitted uses that are not just crops and livestock, correct?
Under the agricultural use, there are multiple uses in the agricultural zone other than growing corn. Yes, sir.
Which is, I believe, the concern of the commission and of the adjacent people in the room as well.
And perhaps I misspoke earlier. There's a misunderstanding about what I said about not asking about the intended use. What I intended to say, and if I didn't say this word specifically, I apologize, but I don't think the commission can look at what the specific use of the property will be under the existing zone. I think they have to look at whether the zoning category is appropriate, which is it's a nuance, but it is different in the analysis. In other words, if the commission were to say, we don't want that use for the property, that would actually arguably be a violation of law, because the question is not whether that use complies with the comprehensive plan. The question is whether the zoning category complies with the comprehensive plan.
That's where we would disagree. You also mentioned that there were no objections from third parties. The county engineer was left out of that because there were objections. It was actually concerned objections can probably be used broadly. But in his report, property is already being used for agricultural purposes, to my understanding. Let's assume or accept that growing some corn or soybeans didn't upset the adjoining property owners before, and growing a few more intermittent crops or typical lease agreements or owner to use in an unapproved farm are not a concern for neighbors going forward. Continuing the moderate use for ag does not necessarily require a zone change unless the activity needs to upgrade to commercial activities allowed in the AG zone. If the continuing use is continued to be ag, then I guess my question begs is, why are we here?
Well, first of all, I don't know that I agree with Mr. Otis's legal conclusions in his email. And while I think he raised concerns, I never saw him actually object to the proposed zone change, but I may have misread his, I think, 2 emails in the staff report. The answer is the current use of the property is non-conforming. It is RA. The zoning category for RA specifically says, this is 4.11 of the zoning ordinance, rural residential district, and it says the district is intended to establish and preserve a quiet, single-family home neighborhood free from other uses except those which are convenient to and compatible with the residences. Minimum lot size 1.5 acres. So the current use of the property, as has existed, is a non-conforming use under it. Okay. So, and I don't know the legal answer to this question. Once I haven't reviewed it, and 2, I would have to do some exhaustive research and probably other analysis. Is right now it's corn. What are all of the crops that have been grown on there in the last 10 years? If someone grew soybeans there last year and they're growing corn here this year, or they grew tobacco 5 years ago before they stopped, could you then switch and grow sunflowers? Or could you go and add cattle? One of the things about non-conforming uses is sometimes it requires a judge or a jury to make the determination about whether that use is valid or not. I don't know sometimes the answers other than to tell a client or the planning commission. There are uses that would be allowed clearly under the agricultural category that are not going on the property today. And some of those uses that are permitted could be done. What are they? I don't know. Can I give you exhaustive list? No. But I think that's one of the important things about understanding the legal issue with respect to the question about what is the specific use of the property going to be, is that Kentucky law, KRS 100-213, does not actually allow the Planning Commission to ask that question. The question is whether the zoning category is appropriate on the comprehensive plan.
Actually, I'd like clarification from Mr. Logan on that.
Excuse me, yes, sir.
The gentleman made a statement regarding KRS, that we are not allowed to ask the specific intent.
I disagree.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue to ask that question. Yes, there is an existing list of permissible uses. I'm interested in what your client is intending to use it for.
Okay. And I can tell you, I don't know all the uses that he would use it for under the agricultural zone.
We do have a permitted use chart. Would you like for me to ask some of those?
Absolutely, please.
For instance, in the ag zone, manufactured homes and mobile homes are permitted. Not only that, field crops are permitted, vegetable farms, livestock are permitted. And that's what we have in our permitted use chart for AG. Okay, those 5 things. Now, wait a minute, I misspoke. Staff says there's no amendment
There's
to
an
it.
additional chart.
It says farm and garden supply stores, that's also permitted.
Mr. Swigert, do you have any other questions? I have only one final question. There's more clarification. And it's, I guess, in response to exactly what Mr. Logan just mentioned, is permissible use. You mentioned twice prime farmland. Actually, I've got more than one question. So prime farmland was brought up specifically. Why?
For the soils,
Yes.
because it's one of the elements inside of the it's one of the things inside of the comprehensive plan that is talked about. The staff report noted things about soils, and within the discussion of this, it seems to be that it's one of the relevant criteria is whether or not property should be developed into residential areas or non-residential areas, and how the taking of soils and the development of property can or can't be appropriate, can or can't be relevant, and that the use of the farm as agricultural uses seems to be relevant to understanding that issue.
So those soils will remain on that farm.
Those soils remain, I don't know if they will or they won't, sir. Yeah, and I'm not aware of anything in the comprehensive plan that addresses that, but I may have missed something in my review of the comprehensive plan about that.
Okay. Lastly, this is more of a staff question. I apologize to you, although you brought it up. As part of the findings of fact, they are contradictory. You mentioned that this is a decrease in density and should be approved as such, but yet the findings of facts include the fact that Franklin County has grown past projections. We have more people, therefore more need for residents, not less.
And at the same time, there's the fact that there is more than sufficient acreage available for that. I think what the comment, if you actually read it in context of the staff report, is that although the population growth has exceeded the expected population, there's still enough land that has already been rezoned and is appropriate and ready for development to house another 50,000 people. And therefore, while the growth has exceeded expectations, there is more than enough land, if you were to downzone this property, to still meet the expected population needs. I do want maybe one other question. I made a question but a comment regarding the soils, and that is, I think the way I understand this, and I could be wrong, is that there's an 800-pound gorilla behind all of this discussion, which is the soils on the property and what the applicant's intended use of the property is for various things, but one of which, as I've heard or read through letters or Facebook posts or other things, involves the use of soils. The current property as it exists today, and any property, even if it's industrial, you can remove soils, you can remove rock. Now you can't do quarries. That's a different type of zoning. But when you develop a piece of property, you can, as you've seen developments, I'm sure, they level the land, they change the topography, they change roads, they build culverts, they build lakes, they build ponds, they build berms, and the topography of property when it's developed changes significantly. And that the RA zoning, in my belief, would result in significant topography changes as it is today by right of the zoning. And that any change of the zoning doesn't change whether that could or could not occur.
Okay. Any other commissioner with a question? Not? Would the attorney or the opposing counsel have any questions of Mr. Billings?
Your Honor, Preston Cecil, I'm here for representing Mark Flora, one of the property owners. I would like to reserve the ability to ask questions till the end since he's reserved his time, if that would be all right with the Planning Commission.
Okay. Now comes the tricky piece.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
Is there any individual in the audience who wishes to ask a question of Mr. Billings? This is not an opportunity for you to make a comment or statement, but rather to ask Mr. Billings a question about the testimony that he just provided. Yes, sir. Please stand and state your name and address.
Richard Jones. I'm one of the owners of the Happy Jack Pumpkin Farm,
Yes, sir.
and I'm supposed to ask the attorney here a question. Is that
Yes, sir.
what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Now,
About the testimony that he just gave.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask you something. You know, is this the Planning and Zoning Committee right here?
Yes.
Now, how come he doesn't know what falls under agriculture practices with P and Z?
Well,
Why was he asking you what the rules are in agriculture and zoning when he is on the board?
I'm sorry, but that's a comment that's being made elsewhere. Mr. Jones can give that when he gives his testimony. That's not a question. This is
Okay, all right.
Richard can ask that when he gets up. I'm sure he's on the list.
All right. Other questions? Seeing none, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Billings.
Mr. Chairman, do you know about how much?
You
my
have
time-
at least 10 minutes left.
Thank you very much, sir.
Uh-huh.
I assume by reservation I can reserve till the other comments are in.
You have 10 minutes left in your hour.
But am I allowed, after people comment, to reserve my time to come up after they comment for that? That's what I guess I was trying to reserve time
Up
for.
to 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was making sure we have that. You were telling me to use it now, so thank you.
No. I'm just making sure that you understand that there's 10 unused minutes in the hour that you were awarded.
I do, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Would staff please come forward, make a presentation? Well, just a moment. There was a second name on that Ford list.
Yes, Richard Jones.
Okay. Just a moment. Mr. Richard Jones, you signed up to speak
Yes, sir.
for the request?
Yes.
Are you still,
No, I got something to say.
well, would you
Yes,
come
sir.
forward, please?
Well, I certainly appreciate everybody being here today for this. And I'd like to tell the commission that
Well, what we first need to do is state your name
All right.
and address.
my name is Richard Jones. My address is 966 Hickman Hill Road, Frankfort, Kentucky, 40601.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And my family owns Happy Jack Pumpkin Farm. I talked to Mr. Tracy on the phone about his intentions, and he told me he was building that road through there because the previous owner had sold off the front of that, or that part of the land along Hickman Hill Road, and he didn't leave the existing entrance to the farm. So Mr. Tracy had to build an entrance to his property. And he told me that he was going to use it for, wanted to change it back to agriculture. And it was like, made me happy. We farm for a living. My grandsons live on the farm. They're the 6th generation to live on that property. And that land borders me. It's a watershed that pours through me. All the rain that falls on that property and the surrounding property flows through our farm. Just millions of gallons of water a year down a stream through our property. So if it was developed into houses, it would be horrible, the erosion and the loss of topsoil. And I was really happy when he told me he was going to use it for a hay farm for agriculture reasons. And it seems to me that there would already be known what agriculture reasons, what the reasons for zoning it for agriculture, what the uses for the zone of agriculture would be. Is that true? You all do know what the uses for agriculture.
We have a document, sir, that provides us the permitted uses per category for each zone.
Okay.
However, that information is not in the record for this particular item, and therefore, it needs to be in the record in order for us to consider.
Okay. Well, I'm tickled that it's going to stay a farm. One of the questions I do have for Mr. Tracy is with his existing commercial business, is he going to store product on that farm? Is he going to store his equipment on that farm? That's one of the questions I have for him.
And my legal counsel would say to you that that's a question to be asked in the next phase if the zoning request is recommended to
Well, I
fiscal
think
court.
with all the lack of, the way the development is eating up green space, we need to keep it as green space. It needs to be kept as agriculture land. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, and if you'll hold on for just a moment. Does any planning commission member have questions? No question.
No questions, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I hate to let Richard get off that asking, but I won't.
Now, my apology, but Bluegrass ad, Miss Malika
Michaela.
McKellar, okay, and Miss Natalie Flores. If you will come forward, please state your name and,
You go first.
Yep, I'm
Address
Michaela
that,
Gary
Kelly.
with the Bluegrass ad.
okay. Mr. Logan, do you need to qualify?
I will, yes.
Thank you.
Now that you've stated your name, how long have you been with Bluegrass Ad?
A week and a half.
A weekend?
Trial by fire.
Yes, sir, I'm a regional land use planner.
Okay, and they wanted to drop you in the middle of this for your first week.
They thought it would be fun, yes.
Yeah. And can you give us just briefly your vita as to your education qualifications?
Yes, sir, I have my master's in regional planning and I've worked as a professional planner for 6 years and I have my AICP certification.
And have you, based on your employment with Bluegrass Ad, reviewed the application tonight and participated in the formation of the staff report?
Yes, briefly, I had a few days with it. It was primarily prepared by the previous staff member that was in my position, Janice Westland, and Natalie, assistant.
And in reviewing that, did you have any additions or deletions to that staff report to make to the commission?
I added some additions in on the last page or two, but
I mean, that is the
nothing
report that was filed. You haven't made any since this report was filed.
else.
I'm sorry. We have some emails that were sent to us that were complaints that were aforementioned.
I don't care about the emails. I'm asking on the report where you made recommendations and conclusions. Is the report that we have the final document?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we introduce the staff report into the record and that she provide staff with any additional testimony that may be appropriate.
Yes, sir. So ordered.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know if I needed to be qualified or not, but I can sit down if that's okay.
Well, we'll ask Mr. Logan,
Yes, sir.
do you need to qualify the second staff member?
I would like for the first staff member to testify if there's anything else to be asked of her, and if not, then I'll be happy to qualify the second.
Yes, sir.
The subject property is a 55.172 acre plot located at 850 Hickman Hill Road in Franklin County and is currently zoned as rural residential A district. The applicant is requesting approval of a zone map amendment from rural residential to agriculture. According to KRS 100.213, a zone change must meet one of 3 criteria, which is detailed on page 4 of the staff report. Staff feels that the request meets the second criteria, that the existing zoning classification is inappropriate at this time, and the proposed zoning of agricultural is appropriate. Based upon the findings of fact found on the page 16 of the staff report, staff recommends approval of this zone map amendment conditional upon a plat being reported for the proposed ag lot. And that's all I've got. Does anyone have questions for me?
Could I ask for
I
clarity?
do.
And I apologize, I realize this is your first week.
Yeah, I apologize for that too.
No, there's no need for you to apologize, congratulations.
Thanks.
The same question I'd asked Mr. Billings, and it's really for clarification because your staff did approve or recommend for approval of the zone map amendment. And in following findings of fact, there's 2. One, which does seem to lend itself to approval, the existing zoning classification given to the proposed tract, et cetera, is inappropriate this time, and the proposed ag zoning is appropriate. The second one is my confusion. It seems to contradict your approval, and since we are recommending for decrease in density, but we're showing that Franklin County's population growth has surpassed anticipation. So that would seem to negate the finding of the approval.
Yeah, and that is an oversight on my part, because we did detail earlier in the staff report, and I'll just read out a small portion of this that should have been included in that finding to make it more clear that, as Mr. Billings was stating, that you do have more capacity than what's anticipated for the current population growth and what's expected in the future. So in addition, the comprehensive plan cites that potential capacity exists for approximately 50,000 new housing units in the unincorporated areas of the county, which is 30 times the projected demand of 1,594 housing units. As a result, and I quote, "There's enough residential land capacity in both the city and the county to accommodate more than 250 times the projected residential growth," page 14 of the comprehensive plan. While the subject property is currently zoned and planned for residential use, development of the subject property for residential use is not required to meet the anticipated housing needs of Franklin County. So that was the intention with that finding, and it looks like for some reason the sentence was not completed, so I apologize for the confusion on that.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yes, I apologize for that. Does anyone else have questions for me?
Now, are you reading from the paragraph on page 15 of the staff report?
Yes, sir,
Is
page
that the
15.
corrected one?
It's the second paragraph from the bottom.
Yeah.
And it starts with "in addition." Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions by Commissioner? If not, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
There were some concerns raised and questions raised about, I guess, the legality of the plat that is filed versus the one that's quote-unquote not filed. Have all of those things been cleared up?
So that's why within our staff report, we recommended approval based upon the condition that they do file and record the plat that was submitted. That's the acreage that we use for the application, the 55.172. So it has not been reviewed and recorded at this time, but it was submitted for consideration with the application and was completed by a professional surveyor. So if you guys do decide to approve the application, we ask that in conjunction with that, the plat does get recorded, so it would become official to clear up that discrepancy.
Okay, now let me get an interpretation. Mr. Logan. So what she's saying to me, and you clarify if need be, that
What she's saying is if you approve this, make a condition that final plat becomes record.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
I thought I could have reached the same.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking in planner speaks.
I like it when you cut through all of the rigmarole. That's great. The second clarification is, at one point there was conversation about there having to be a certain footage of frontage onto the roadway for an agricultural zone piece of property. Are you saying that that the new plat, the one that's not yet filed, accommodates and fixes that issue that was a concern before?
Yes, sir. That issue, and I hope I can do the best to speak to this because I was not there when that happened, was my understanding is that the initial application that was filed by the applicant was asking for a split zoning. So part of it was going to remain, I believe, RR or RA? RA, and then the remainder he was asking to have as agricultural. And so I think there was an issue with where he was proposing to have that RA, that there wasn't going to be the 200 feet required of street frontage. But with the split zoning no longer being part of the application, that issue has been cleared up. And I was going to try and find the exact length here, but I believe it's about 600 feet of frontage. So. And I can find the exact number if you want it, but it is in the staff report.
576.
Thank you. 576.
Okay. Now, those were my questions. Now, my next thing is, Mr. Billings, do you have questions of staff?
No questions.
Opposing counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, I just do have a quick couple, if I could, just for clarification purposes.
Well, ma'am, if you'll
Stay
stay
up?
close
Okay.
by.
Yeah. I just didn't know if you wanted him on the mic.
Well, he needs to step up and give a name and address for the record, but
My name is Preston Cecil with Bullock and Kaufman, and I represent Mark Flora, who's one of the property owners that's adjacent to this property. And again, I apologize, I know you're just coming into this issue, but going through the staff report, it seems the main issue, or the main finding for the rezoning positively was that the current zoning is inappropriate because it does not have the infrastructure.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Looking at the findings of fact on page 15, it says the current RA zoning is inappropriate because the subject property lacks infrastructure. It cites some sections and then specifically says it requires a full range of community facilities, including public sewer or approved sewage treatment facilities.
Is that quoted?
That's quoted here. And then it says, according to the 2010 review of the subject property, the closest sewage connection is in Ducker's subdivision.
That's correct.
Okay.
My understanding is that if the property was to be developed as the RA with the 15,000 square foot lot, it would be required to be on sewer.
Now, it's obviously possible for that property to be developed in less than the full amount of lots in the RA, correct? It could be fewer lots.
Yes,
Okay.
it could be fewer, but I think I might have to defer to Franklin County staff as to whether it would be required to
Right.
be on sewer, but that is my understanding.
Well, and then based upon this language, it appears that sewer is the only utility that is not located at this development. Is that also correct?
My understanding is that there is a 4-inch water line along Hickman Hill Road, which isn't sufficient for a fire hydrant, but there's a 6-inch line along Autumn View Lane, which is sufficient for a fire hydrant. I don't know what capacity issues are there, or if there are any. So that's my understanding of the water situation.
And this finding says, or proposed finding says, that the current zoning is inappropriate because the subject property lacks infrastructure, correct?
Yes, sir.
And looking at page 10 and 11 of the staff report, the criteria to be reviewed is direct development into areas within or in close proximity to the existing infrastructure services. Isn't this property in close proximity to those utilities?
I would not consider it in close proximity to the sewer, with where the current sewer lines, sewage connections are in the Ducker subdivision and where it would need to connect.
Well, the guideline says public sewer or approved sewage treatment facility, right? And of course, there are a lot of these lots out there that have septic systems.
Yeah, which were, my understanding, were approved prior to the
Right.
zoning being out there.
Right.
But
But-
again,
but-
I would defer to staff on clarifications for this,
Defer to,
to Mr. Hewitt.
okay. But again, the finding that you all make says that the property has to be, have these infrastructure utilities, and the guideline says they have to be in close proximity, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's typically on the developer to bear that cost, but like I said, with the closest sewage connection being a Ducker subdivision, I don't know if that would qualify as close proximity.
And it has all of the other, we've talked about all of the other utilities available.
I don't know what the engineering standards are for roadway, so I can't speak to that, but.
But you're not aware of it having any other issue
Yes, sir.
sitting here today? Okay. That's all I have.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to cross-examine the witness.
Okay, now do you want to do it?
He wants to cross-examine, she's not, she's a separate witness and he has the right to do that as attorney, yes.
Yes,
Are you cross-examining me?
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you meant him.
Sorry, this lawyer stuff, sometimes it's confusing. Can you turn to your staff report? This is one of the letters submitted towards the end. It is the report from Michael, and if I butcher this, I'll say it's either Hesse or Hess. I'm not sure if you can pronounce the last E. Who's the design engineer. There's no pagination in it, so it is probably about 7 or 8 pages from the end, or 6 pages.
It's in
from
the appendices.
Could you read into the record what their position is in the last sentence of the first full paragraph?
Excuse me a second. If you're cross-examining her, how is she going to read evidence of someone else into the record?
Obviously, I'll object for the record as well.
In your staff report, did you rely upon this letter in forming your opinion regarding the lack of sewerability to the property?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Well, I would say that it wasn't me, it was Ms. Westland that wrote that portion of the report, so.
But then you reviewed those findings before it was finalized and prepared and submitted?
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to allow the meeting?
Yes, we are. This is administrative period, and it's typically permitted to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
No further questions.
While there's a pause,
Okay.
I think Mr. Jackson gets to ask you.
I'm happy to try and answer any other
I am
questions.
not
if you
going
have
to
them.
ask any questions that are leading or that provides any kind of information that it might be misleading. What I'm going to do is to ask if anyone in the audience have a question of
Michaela.
Michaela.
Yep.
Miss
Right.
Gary.
So I've got young man in the rear. Sir, if you would step forward, state your name and address for the record, and ask your question. Please, sir.
My name is Jordan Hall, live at 841 Hickman Hill. I was just wondering if you've been out to the property or nearby yet.
Yes, sir.
That was my only question.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am. Come forward, please.
My name's Jane Nitz, and I live at 132 Farmbrook Circle. And I may have misunderstood you, so my question to you is, were you saying that it would be inappropriate for those homes in that area, if they were to be allowed, to be using septic fields instead of sewer?
That's why I was hoping to get clarification from Mr. Hewitt, but my understanding is that the subregs or the subdivision and development regulations requires it to be on sewer if it were to develop in the standard for the zoning district that it currently is. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Michael Atkins from 842 Hickman Hill. So would it be acceptable for there to be a sewage at that property?
Yeah, if there were a connection that were to develop,
Is septic okay?
my understanding is that septic is not okay for the development standards that are required for that zoning district. But again, if Mr. Hewitt wants to go against that, but my understanding from the subdivision and development regulations is that it's required to be on sewer.
So my house that has been constructed and is on septic would be in violation?
I don't know what your zoning district is, so I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Michaela. Do we need to do anything with?
Is she like to testify?
I think she just wants me to submit some things to the record that I forgot to do. So if I could just submit, we received just a few additional emails since the staff report has gone out that we wanted to make sure everyone had a copy of, and we also included an application for the encroachment permit that Mr. Tracy applied for, or I apologize, that the applicant applied for
If you
the
will-
driveway.
If you'll deliver that to the secretary,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? I just have a question, technical.
Mr. May has a question.
I just have a question just for our council. Do we need to label these exhibits?
Generally, it is attached as an appendix to the report.
Okay.
I think that's what you did, was make that appendix, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We already
That's
had
fine.
an appendix that had all the correspondence and any additional information that we received, so we're essentially adding this on because it's come in since the
I just
staff
wanted to be
report's
clear,
come out.
because we already get.
Good point.
Sorry,
They've got
I'm-
it. No, that's fine. It's a good point. They have an appendix going, and I'm assuming that these emails are in relation to this application.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Madam Secretary.
Preston Cecil.
I'm going to yield to my client real quick. He wants to say something before I go. That would be
Mark Flora.
Good evening. My name is Mark Flora. My property's at 854 Hickman Hill. I would just like to apologize for my phone going off, but my mother's in the hospital, not in very good shape, so it was thanks to my wife, so I apologize for that. Just a couple of things that I had. One of the concerns on mine, one of the reasons that I feel we need to keep this are, I did have a phone conversation with Mr. Tracy. It was about me.
Objection, this is hearsay. It is in fact hearsay, but he can relay what his conversation was. We listened to hearsay testimony as a part of this administrative tribunal.
You understand?
My objection
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. It was about a purchase that I wanted to make after I realized he bought the property at Hickman Hill. And during that conversation, he told me at that point he did not want to sell anything, any piece of property there at all. And I asked him at that point what he planned on doing with it. His comment to me was, I work in Lexington, Georgetown, and Frankfort. That property puts me in the middle of all that, and my intended use is for hauling topsoil off of it for my business. That was the conversation between he and I left it at that. Another thing, we all bought our property out there under the assumption that later on Mr. McGee, which Mr. Tracy bought the property from, was in process of developing it. That's why the first 4 lots were sold off. And my understanding is you can only sell 5 within 5 years or something. But another lot was sold to a house that already was there. They just purchased a 1-acre area right behind their house just to make their lot a little bit bigger than what it was. As far as that road back there, it may be called a driveway, so to speak. It's a very hefty road, in my opinion, and I know all the material that was used to put that road or drive in, whatever you want to call it, was all of the rock, several dump trucks for 2 or 3 days, hauled all that material from out where Cracker Barrel and all that stuff is, where they're developing now. All of that rock was brought in. I was there while part of it was still being farmed, and they drove tractors in and out, to farm. They brought cultivators, drag harrows, things like that. The road that was being used then was nothing like that. Those were pretty good sized John Deere tractors. It was just a gravel drive back so far, and from that point on, it was, just dirt. So I don't know, my own personal opinion, yeah, it's asking for corn. Based on the conversation I had with Mr. Tracy, I feel like it might be being presented as a Trojan horse. Yeah, I'm growing corn, that's what I put, but am I going to use it agriculture forever? My opinion, no. Based on what I was told by Mr. Tracy.
Other things of concern, I think, kind of get a little more into legal, which at this point I would like to yield to my attorney, Mr. Preston Cecil, let him finish up on my time on this.
Okay. He'll
I have
come back.
questions for the witness.
Well, I'd like,
I'm happy to do whatever you want,
No, no,
but the
if you
attorney
want
goes.
cross-examination, do it, if the witness is complete.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Flora, first, I'm sorry about your mother, and I totally understand that you keep your phone on. So, the unfortunate thing is sometimes I gotta ask tough questions, but, do you know of any, laws, restrictions, ordinances that, that the current road violates?
No.
In your opinion, has he done anything wrong by putting that road in today?
Not really. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of, my opinion is, it's a fairly hefty road for a driveway.
Do you have any knowledge of any law, ordinance, regulation that would prevent him from doing what you described, he told you in that conversation, as the property exists today under the current zoning? No further questions.
Okay.
You all have any questions?
Actually, I want the planning commission to ask you and he questions at the same time, since you're speaking from the same page. If you come.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a couple of housekeeping matters, I filed a letter with the Planning Commission before the last hearing when we were supposed to have it. And I just want to make sure everybody has a copy and that I move that it be part of the record. I brought copies if anyone does not have a copy of my letter. So I want to first ask if anybody needs a copy and I can provide it.
Everyone else had received it as part of the original packet.
In order to make sure, can he submit a copy to the clerk?
Yes.
Yes.
No, that's.
I didn't get that letter.
Do you have a copy of your presentation?
I'm sorry? Sorry.
So I guess the question is, does anybody else need a copy? Did anybody not get it? So I can provide it. May I approach?
Please.
I don't think anybody got
That, that came as part of the original packet.
So it's on.
Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I received a petition of the neighbors out in this community just moments before coming to the meeting today. Neither my client nor I had anything to do with it, but they asked me to present it to the Planning Commission. So I only have one copy because that's all they gave me, but they've asked that I present it. So I would like to do that and move that it be part of the record.
Certainly, you can take for whatever weight you deem appropriate for a petition.
Give it to the secretary, please.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, there's a very short heading I'd like to read into the record as part of the proceeding, if I could. It's just a paragraph long.
Go ahead.
Members of the Planning Commission, due to the high volume of families and children in the immediate area, we, the undersigned residents of the Spring Hill neighborhood, respectfully ask that the zoning for parcel 104-00-00-005.00 remain RA. A change to ag would allow potential uses that would increase commercial activity and heavy traffic inconsistent with the residential nature of the area. And then it's signed, I think, by a little over 90 Franklin County residents.
Okay. Give it to the secretary, please.
Thank you.
Don't go to sleep.
You ready to go?
We ready?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Billings started out his presentation by saying that there are really only a couple of ways that a rezoning is allowed in Kentucky, and we do agree on that. One of those ways is if the proposed zoning is in agreement with the comprehensive plan. If you have the staff report on this issue, it states specifically at page 6 that the proposed zoning is not in agreement with the proposed, with the comprehensive plan. Therefore, that takes that potential reason for approval out of the equation. And again, I know Mr. Billings talked about some other items that might come into play here, but the bottom line is that the future land use in this zone has been a rural residential for many, many years. So the citizens of Franklin County, through their representatives, have agreed that the future for this property will be residential, and it's been that way for many years. So since it is not in agreement with the comprehensive plan, and there has been no change in the neighborhood or the area, the only thing left is that the property is, the current zoning is inappropriate. And as I questioned the staff, their sole finding that the property is appropriate is that it does not have the infrastructure necessary for development. And I would tell you, again, under goal 3, the reasoning that was given, and we heard the testimony, is that there's no sewer directly adjacent to the property. That's not the test. The test is whether or not there is infrastructure in close proximity to this property. And that question's already been answered by this planning commission. Back in 2010, this property was rezoned from RR to RA, and I've included that staff report as part of my letter. That staff report, at that time, the staff stated that, quote, public facilities are in the area and the property could be served by those facilities. That is the requirement, that is the standard that was met. This planning commission rezoned the property based upon that finding, and nothing has changed since that time. As far as the actual staff report and the current staff report and the letters from the different parties, I think as Mr. Lusher pointed out, Mr. Otis's comments were omitted. If you look at Mr. Otis's comments, he's the county engineer. He says that this property is well positioned to be an RA use as currently zoned. He also points out some misgivings about changing it to ag. He says ag does offer some uses that are less than compatible with the adjoining residential uses. So the county attorney points out adjoining residential uses and says that ag in some situations is incompatible.
Can I ask for a clarification point of order? You said county, you were testifying as the county engineer made comments, but you said county attorney.
I apologize.
I just wanted to double check for
Yes,
the record.
it's
to see
county
if that-
engineer.
Sorry.
That's okay.
You know, I'm sorry, you didn't recognize me.
You're
Sorry,
fine.
I apologize.
You fine. Go
Just
ahead.
realized you didn't recognize me. Sorry.
So, and again, as pointed out in the 2010 report, the current zoning of RA is in agreement with the comprehensive plan, showing this area as suburban residential neighborhood. Both the suburban residential neighborhood future planning and the RA have as their main activity single-family residential homes. So this property has been foreseen in the Franklin County Comprehensive Plan and Future Land Use Guide as for, being developed for single-family homes, and RA is a compatible zone for that. And this planning commission found that very fact in 2010. Again, on page 15 of the current staff report, the staff states that the current zoning is inappropriate because it lacks the infrastructure. That's why I wanted to question the staff, and I know the person who actually wrote this is not here, but it appears from the staff report, and that's all we have, that the only issue is the sewer. It's got electric, it's got water, it's got everything necessary, and there's already been a finding by this planning commission that there is the necessary infrastructure near this property, which is the requirement under goal number 3. I'd also point out, and I think it's been brought up before, that there are Spring Hill Estates. They are all served, I believe, by septic, and there's been some testimony that septic might not be allowed if you develop this to its fullest. We haven't developed that, but that's not in the staff report, and that's not addressed at all in any of the comments. So I believe in certain situations, septic systems would be allowed. Finally, I have attached to my letter the deed into KT Holdings. And the reason I've done that is because when KT Holdings purchased this property, it contains restrictions that it only be used for residential, single-family property, for private, single-family residential purposes.
Objection, Mr. Chairman. That document is a private rights document. It's not a planning commission document, and under KRS 100, has no bearing on the planning commission decision under the 3 criteria.
Here's why I disagree with that. The KT Holdings purchased property with known restrictions on it, only for single-family residential use. He is now asking this planning commission for a rezoning to ag, which is specifically prohibited under his restrictions. That basically is going to create a potential taking of the property. So for those reasons, I think that is something that this planning commission is allowed to look at and base their decision upon.
It is certainly not a taking, Mr. Chairman. If anything, and this is very clear case law on this, when you have deeds of restrictions, whether they're filed in the deed of conveying title or in separate covenants, conditions, restrictions, master deeds, etc., there's a difference between the private rights between parties, which can be amended freely between the parties thereto, or further restricted or lessened, versus the governmental obligations regarding the zoning of the property. And unless the planning commission or other governmental bodies are made a party to the private rights, it is an irrelevant consideration with respect to zone change or any other land use determination.
It's a good thing I have a legal counsel sitting at the table.
Legal counsel is going to say
Your
that
Honor, what is it? Your Honor.
this commission does not have the authority to enforce a deed restriction. Whether or not that restriction is applicable or not is an issue between those parties that only circuit court can determine and not us.
I would say currently, these restrictions, and I checked again today, are currently valid on this property. When KT Holdings purchased it, they knew these restrictions were on the property. However, they're here asking
Same
for
objection. He's being argumentative about the document.
However,
Objection's been ruled upon.
Well,
there's been no ruling.
let me clarify something. Every commissioner heard our legal counsel say it has no bearing. And if Mr. Billings wants to waste his time discussing that item further, he can use his time
Let me
however
ask
he
counsel
wishes.
if I could. My understanding is that you said that it can't be enforced by the planning
That
commission.
is correct.
Not that it had no bearing
I
on it.
will further elaborate that if we don't have the authority to enforce it, we don't have the authority to use that as a basis to either deny or grant any issues.
So,
I would agree with that as far as a basis. What I'm saying is it's going to create a situation where you have, if you rezone this, you will not be able to do anything with the property because of the restrictions on it. So that's why it's a public document. I included it with my my information, because I think it's important. The other thing is, as my client pointed out, the other folks out there have similar restrictions, and so they relied upon this property being rezoned, or being residential for the future, along with the comprehensive plan,
Same objection.
to allow.
Mr. Chairman, is their reliance is not an evidence under whether it complies with the comprehensive plan, or the zoning is appropriate or inappropriate under Kentucky law.
Understood.
And again, I've already made the argument that the current use is is compatible with the comprehensive plan, and this board's already found that. So we believe there is bearing. Again, because of the contradiction between uses, I think it is important. I think it would be allowed, but I will defer to council for the planning commission on that issue. I'm done with my presentation. I'd be glad to take any questions that you or anyone else has, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Does any planning commission member have a question of the attorney and his client? Mr. May.
I have a question. Before I ask the question, I want to ask our counsel first before I ask the question. Is it appropriate to ask whether or not anyone knows the distance where the current sewer is in Tucker Station relative to?
I think that's a relevant question.
Okay, I wanted to ask first.
I don't know whether he knows or not.
May I ask Mr. Cecil, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know that, I'm not trying to trick anybody, trap anybody, I'm just curious, because I know a little bit, not a whole lot, about sewers from the city standpoint, and how many, approximately how many feet or miles that, I'll think it's miles, but.
We didn't really address that question because we believe the staff report is flawed in this particular issue, because they make as a finding, it's inappropriate because the subject property lacks infrastructure, sewer, that doesn't have sewer. They don't even develop or discuss or review the actual standard, which is infrastructure at or near the property. And since they failed to do that and relying on a spurious conclusion, we believe that the report's flawed for that reason. And the fact of how close it is flawed. And I would also add the 2010 report, which you all have a copy of, specifically states, and it's a finding that was in front of this board, that there is the necessary infrastructure at or near this property. So that testimony has already been provided, and this body's already agreed that that's the case in 2010.
May I ask that question later when we have staff sworn, if staff would know that question?
Staff is not going to be testifying.
I know, I was going to say, I don't know that they are, so I didn't know, I'm thinking I don't know how else I can really get the answer to that, but thank you.
I'll try to sneak it in. Are there other questions by commissioners?
The sewer, but the water's not adequate either.
Mr. Billy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Cecil, do you have any evidence tonight to present regarding where the closest public sewer access point is to the property?
I think I've already explained that the fact that the staff did not pursue the question of how close it was when Goal 3 requires it, meets the requirements of the reporting.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cecil, his credit has been a great lawyer answer, but he didn't say yes or no. I'd like a yes or no answer.
The answer is no, because
Okay.
I think it doesn't make any difference.
The letter that you submitted to the record tonight, that letter concerned objections when the property application was before it was amended, when it was a proposed split zoning, correct?
That's correct.
Have you submitted a revised objection letter regarding the revised application?
I have the letter here to submit. The only difference that would be the fact that that letter dealt with the split zoning. Everything else is pertinent and addressed in the current report. There have been no other changes.
Did you submit that in the record yet?
That's what I did when I came up here initially.
The new one?
Yes, that's what I just.
Oh, I got the old one.
No, it's the letter that I submitted before, but but I wanted to make sure it got to the record.
Okay, but you don't, I just want to clarify, you don't have a new letter.
Do I have a new letter addressing the fact that the issue of the split zoning has been removed? No,
Okay.
because it's irrelevant, because it's not an issue now.
Are you aware of the letter dated May 6, 2021 from Michael Hess at the city?
What letter?
The
It's
one
part
that's-
of the staff report?
That's attached as an appendix to the staff report?
Yes.
Did you review that letter in preparing your letter? and
Hold on,
objections?
let me find it. What page is it on?
It's not numbered PDF, it's about 6 or 7 pages before the end. That's the.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to reference the last 2 sentences of the first paragraph that reads, the district has no issues with the proposed zone change, period. The property currently lacks access to public sewers and no plans to extend sewers to the property. You see that sentence?
Correct.
Do you have any evidence to present that contradicts the statements?
Well, no, but it says the property currently lacks access. It doesn't say if it's in close proximity, which is the actual standard under the goal 3.
I'm just asking if you have any evidence that contradicts the statements in this letter.
Which statement is that? The fact that it currently lacks access to public
Yes,
sewers?
that's the first one.
Yeah, no.
Okay, do you have any evidence to contradict the statement that it has no plans to extend sewers? to
I have no
property?
idea whether they do or not, but I think that is not the question under the regulations.
This is, you've had your presentation, let me ask the questions now.
I get to respond to them. I mean, they're not gonna,
So, does your client have any information regarding the distance or proximity between the closest public sewer access point? Not just you, but your.
I could ask my client and we could look at that, but I don't know the answer to that question.
If you would turn back to the staff report. Actually, I'll reserve that comment, I'll make it in final arguments rather than an argumentative question. I'm done with my questions, sir, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Mr. Logan, do you have a question of?
No, sir.
Okay, Mr. Preston, okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Secretary.
Corey and Howard Jackson.
We can't hear you.
Corey Ann.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Corey Ann Howard Jackson, a resident of 220 Plantation Lane, Frankfort, Kentucky 40601. I live about 3 or 4 streets over from Hickman Hill. It's been brought to my attention by numerous other residents, numerous neighbors, really, people that we call friends. Some I like to refer to even as family. We're a very close-knit neighborhood. I'm very concerned about the safety of the residents. We're a very active neighborhood. We have a lot of walkers with dogs. We have a lot of runners. We have a lot of kids with strollers, myself included. So to see in recent weeks a lot of use, that being the exit of Spring Hill, using that road, Spring Hill, which is in our neighborhood, not the exit of Hickman Hill, is a concern. It's been brought to my attention that maybe some of these construction vehicles of sort have difficulty exiting Hickman Hill, and that's why they're choosing to use our neighborhood. Because of that, like I said, we're concerned. You know, we have kids and family and everybody else that use that. We also, that entrance and exit that they're using in this stance is a 90-degree turn in and out of our neighborhood, and we have a lot of issues with that 90-degree turn without big, heavy equipment entering and exiting. You know, we have to slow down and about near stop and let other vehicles in and out. It's right off of 421 too, and that can create a backup issue at times as well. I don't think we've really spoke to the wear and tear of our existing roads within our neighborhood. I talked about safety, but you know, our neighborhood roads and our county road right there, several of them is not intended or conducive for long-term construction equipment or agricultural equipment coming and going. So I stay concerned about that as well. The last thing I'll say is that, you know, what exactly is the intended agricultural use? I think is the real question here. Why is so much rock and dirt being repeatedly removed? Where is it going? Is it going to another existing business that we don't know about? The last thing I'd like to say, when this property was initially sold, the full acreage, which includes the 4 residential plots, was sold as RA, as you all know. But since the full acreage was sold as RA, am I correct that a zone change cannot be made unless all the acreage is changed? I don't know the answer to that, but I'd like to know the answer. So, with that, I hope I've spoke well for the neighborhood, and we appreciate your consideration, and we encourage you to vote against it. Thank you.
If you'll wait just a second, Ms. Howard, I'm sorry, Corey. Need to ask if any planning commission members have questions regarding your testimony.
I just have one.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned, so everybody can hear me. You mentioned the vehicles coming in and out of your neighborhood.
Mhm.
Could you just describe what those vehicles are?
Sure. Huge dump trucks, large construction equipment, big tired vehicles. Some other neighbors have voiced their concerns about those vehicles actually getting into their yard and into their grass area on Hickman Hill. The fact that Hickman Hill is too small of a road for those construction equipment vehicles to enter and exit.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have
Yes, sir.
Do you have any evidence that any rule, regulation, or zoning ordinance is currently being violated by the use of those vehicles today by this property owner?
No, but I will say that right now they're at least being respectful enough, or they were, to use the Hickman Hill entrance and exit, and now they're not. And I think that's what the neighborhood is concerned about.
Okay. Mr. Cecil? Okay.
Can I ask?
Kayla, do you have a question?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Sure.
Oh,
I think of something.
Can I ask a question?
sure, you can ask her a question.
Okay, well, no, I don't want to ask her a question. I would like for.
I think the question that I asked, we'd
Yeah,
like
I would
an
like an
answer
answer to
for.
the question that she asked.
I'm sorry, but this is not, the question she asked the commission doesn't have, that's not before them tonight. This is a hearing on this particular property. If you're asking about rezoning of another piece of property or a reversion, that needs to go to the staff to ask specifically about that piece. I mean, we can't give her an opinion on a piece of property not before us.
Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity to ask the question. I think it can speak for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary.
Jane Nitz.
I'm Jane Nitz, 132 Farmbrook Circle. I'll tell you again. Wow, I've gotten a big education tonight. I've heard a lot of legal statements and a lot of evaluations on planning and things like that for property. But I guess my question to you is, does the concern that rezoning would negatively affect our lifestyle that we live in our neighborhood bear any weight on your decision? Because if it does, then I have something to say, but if it doesn't, then my point would be moot. So, does it make a difference?
We would like to hear your statement.
You would like us to, okay. First of all, I would like to say,
For the record.
I'd like to say, where's Richard? Oh, we love Happy Jack in our neighborhood. We think it is wonderful. We absolutely love it. And I would also like to say that the beautiful pictures of corn that were up there on the screen, we would love to continue to see. But when we see a huge road going in there, we're concerned that's not what we're going to continue to see, whether or not you call it agriculture. In 1980, we moved into this neighborhood, and we loved it. In fact, we loved it so much that we bought a lot across the street and built a bigger home, because when we moved in, there was a family of 3. And by the time we finished, there was a family of 7. And so our children have had the benefit and enjoyment of growing up in that neighborhood, and we love it there. Originally, when I got involved in just even coming to this meeting tonight, or thinking of coming to this meeting tonight, a month ago actually, was because I wanted to support our neighbors. I wanted our neighbors to be able to have the same enjoyable family neighborhood residential setting that we enjoyed. And so that was my goal in doing that. But much to my surprise, as we live on the complete other side, so I was thinking this really doesn't make any difference to us, but I wanted to support our neighbors in the neighborhood. But much to my surprise, as I mentioned, a few days ago, huge dump trucks were driving down our road, which is on the exact opposite side. They weren't on Hickman Hill. They weren't even on Spring Hill. They were completely around the exact opposite side of the neighborhood on Farmbrook Circle, the complete opposite side. And I'm thinking, what is the point of that? And then I realized I am directly involved. This is now affecting not just my neighbors extremely on the other side, but it's affecting me as well in our neighborhood. I'm thankful that our 5 children had the benefit and the enjoyment of growing up in a safe residential neighborhood. And I desire that same benefit for all the current Spring Hill families that are now in the neighborhood. So I just would recommend that you not change it, but that you keep it as it is. Thank you. Yes.
Ma'am, if you would.
Yes.
Any planning commission member that have questions? Okay. Mr. Billy?
Thanks, and I forgot your last name, ma'am.
Jane Nitz.
Miss Nitz, thank you.
Yes.
You talked about a dump truck, and did you see where the dump truck came from?
Yes, it came down Spring Hill. I'd seen them over there. I'd been on Hickman Hill, and it was the same trucks that were on Hickman Hill pulling into the driveway that were now on the extreme other end of the neighborhood.
The gravel driveway that then you saw later on?
Excuse me, I called it a driveway. I'd call it a road, yeah.
Whether you call it a driveway or a gravel road, I'm not trying to be argumentative about that.
Okay.
The same dump truck you saw on the property being sought to be rezoned, you then saw on your side of the subdivision later that day, correct?
To the best of my understanding.
Very good. Do you know of any knowledge of any rule, regulation that was violated by the truck driving down your road?
Other than moral, no.
Okay. Other than, and morals are subjective sometime. Do you know of any objective law that was violated?
I think I already answered that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you know of any other law being violated by what's currently going on the property today, other than
Well,
moral?
yes, when dump trucks are driving on other people's property and putting ruts in them, yes, I would think that would be against code, wouldn't you, or law?
You're talking about if a dump truck were to go into another person's property and
Yes.
leave a rut like 3 foot into it?
I don't know how far into it would be required, but I would think that might have something. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But I am a neighborhood resident who does care about the
I
neighborhood.
understand. The truck that you're talking about that is alleged to have backed into
It wasn't just one truck.
the trucks, then, the vehicles
Okay,
you're talking
thank you.
about? Do you know who operates those trucks?
I don't know who operates them. I just know that I've seen them. I saw them in one place, then I saw them in another place. And to the best of my understanding, they were coming from that property.
And those operations are actually not on the property in question, those are across the street. On the property in question, okay,
I'm not sure what you're referring to by property in question.
this property that's being sought to be rezoned tonight, the property in question, that's the property we're talking about.
Okay, you
Not
said that,
properties across the street.
that,
Let me
no,
finish my
excuse me,
question.
you
Let me
said
finish
the
my
dump
question.
trucks were not
Let
on
me-
the property
let
in
me
question.
finish my
They
question.
were on the property in
No.
question.
Let me finish my question.
Okay, but I can't, your premise is incorrect, so you'll have to help me with
I
that.
wasn't able to finish my question. On the property in question, which is being sought to be rezoned, for the vehicles that are on there, do you have any knowledge of any violation of law regarding the property in question?
Mr. Chair, first of all, she is not tried to say she's an attorney. She has not tried to say she is giving an opinion of law. And I wish Counselor would address that to the other lawyer that's here and not her.
Thank you.
Fair enough, Mr. Chairman. I just have heard a lot of comments that comment about things being wrong, and I haven't heard any violation of law going on. And if that exists, I'd like to know about it. That's the reason for my question. But I'll be glad to reserve it for later.
And that's why I opened my statement with, there've been legal statements and planning statements, but my concern is more how it affect our lifestyle. So, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Madam Secretary.
I can't read that. I think it might be Ken or Kim Purdue.
Kevin.
Oh, okay, sorry. Kevin Purdue.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Purdue. I live at 2822 US Highway 421, Midway, Kentucky 40347. Our property is the farm that's east of the property in question here, and we've lived there since 1995. You know, I guess we can look at all these legal arguments and everything, but you know, so can you make that change? I don't know. That's up for the lawyers to decide. But should you? If you look at the property, the lawyer says that, or Mr. Billings says that, it's inappropriate that it's rural agriculture and that it should be agriculture. But when you look at all the surrounding property, everything west of that property is rural agriculture, and everything else surrounding that is rural residential. So for him to say that agriculture is more appropriate, I just don't, that just doesn't make any sense to me. His argument that there's insufficient infrastructure, for the rural agriculture. Well, if he's just going to do agriculture, then it really doesn't matter what the infrastructure is, because he would just be doing corn or whatever agriculture there is. So I don't understand why that's an argument in their favor that property should be changed to agriculture. And let's see. The other point that he made that was who's not objecting, but those people aren't living there. The people that are living around that area are objecting because they're concerned about what the future holds for that. That road, the picture that they showed you, if you looked at it, those boulders that are on there are 3 and 4 feet in diameter. This isn't just some little gravel road that they put in. This is a massive road that they put in that's I would think would be used for heavy equipment. It's not something for some simple agricultural purposes. And he's like I said, it's when they were putting in that road, they started, I believe it was on a Monday, and I didn't know what was that the road was going in there, but there was like banging and clanging going on there. I thought there were gunshots going off. I didn't know what was going on, and of course it was the back of these trucks coming in and out for 4 days, making this noise. So I don't think it's our. He says that there's actually would be more traffic with the rural residential. And I don't think we're concerned so much about the more traffic as the type of traffic. It's those huge trucks that are coming in and out day in and day out that is our concern. We don't know what his purposes are. Apparently you don't have to state what those purposes are. And when Richard says that, well, what does agricultural, uses include? Well, Richard, like he said, his family's been there for 6 generations, and I doubt Richard can tell you, all the possible intended uses for agriculture. We just don't know, and that's our concern. So I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, you finished?
I'm done.
Any planning commissioner have a question? Mr. Billings, you have a question?
Just clarification, your property is the one directly to the east of the civic property, correct?
To the east.
And you currently use it for agricultural purposes, correct?
We use it for agricultural purposes. And we have no problems with him using that for agricultural purposes. That's what it is.
Sir, just a moment, sir.
Kevin.
Just a moment. And now, does anyone else in the audience have a question? Seeing none, hearing none, thank you, sir. Madam Secretary.
I can't read the next name.
Oh, well, it's obviously Emily Reyes. MD, starts with an A for the last name, maybe? Adams? No?
Let's see.
It's Mike E. Adams.
That's
Oh.
This
Yeah.
one, okay.
Eeks.
Not an attorney or a doctor. Should be.
Pharmacist.
Okay, you're next.
What's his name?
Mike.
All right, I don't have the PowerPoint.
Mr. Adams?
Could we pull up the staff report, page 4?
Do we have the staff report, page 4,
Can we pull it up there?
electronically? If not, no, sir, we
That's
can't.
not staff, that was the apple.
We have it in the packet.
Can we take down the PowerPoint?
Can we take down the PowerPoint?
Yeah, there's misleading facts in it.
Well,
It's okay.
just do your testimony,
Yeah, I
sir.
probably
Don't
shouldn't
worry
say-
about the
So if
PowerPoint.
you can look at the staff report, right, page 4,
Yeah,
it's a map. Nowhere on there does it say AG. We want to go from RA to AG. Why not RR?
yes, sir, that picture only displays the actual existing
So I have
zoning. It's not proposed or anticipated zoning, it's what every parcel is currently zoned.
Right, that's what
And
they're
the
currently
AG is
zoned.
what they're asking for, so it would not be there.
That is what they're asking for.
Yes,
Page 4.
I'm on page 4 of 16.
Where it says RA, because that's what it is.
So is Happy Jacks classified as AG? Because, again, I have to say, we love Happy Jacks. It's not, right? So I think everyone's concern is, again, what the intended use is, which I know this is probably not the time to say it, but I'll state it anyway. I think in your presentation, you said that the land was developed or rezoned and then it was not used for its intended purpose in your presentation. That's not true. I have a house built there. I have a house on that lot adjoining this property. Corn would be fine. But dump trucks parked on the road, which I have seen, and yes, it says Tracy's Gravel and Sand on the side, which is against the law, before you get up here and ask me. That's what we're afraid of. That's what we don't want. My house sits on septic. Somebody else wants to build a house out there, they can sit on septic too. That's how the property was purchased. That's how it should be used. You're here just to determine what's it suited for. You were either wrong in the past, right? I don't think so. It's zoned correctly. Please leave it as it is. That's the only thing I have to say.
Okay. Does any commissioner have a question of Mr. Adams. Mr. Billings.
No questions. No questions.
Okay.
Jordan Hall.
Once again, my name is Jordan Hall. We live at 841 Hickman Hill, sort of directly across the street from the subject property to the west. There's been a lot of debate tonight about defining terms. Mr. Billings is a lawyer. He uses his words very carefully, and I applaud him for that. And he chooses what he doesn't say very carefully. He described Hickman Hill Road as a right-of-way. My family and I would describe it as the street that we live on. It's the street my wife pushes our little kids down every day. It's limited in its capacity. It's limited in what it can handle as far as weight and all that sort of thing. There's been a lot of debate about the word agriculture and what that means. Probably means something similar to everybody in this room. You probably think of corn. You probably think of wheat and crops. But for zoning purposes, obviously, it doesn't mean what it means in its general use. My understanding is that Wilson Nurseries is currently zoned agriculture. I think your common man would define that as commercial. I don't know how Mr. Billings would define it. I think that is our concern as a group. We don't know what the intended use is. Evidently, Mr. Billings doesn't, or he's willfully ignorant of what his client intends. But I would say if the intention is to keep traditional agricultural uses, corn, crops like that, I'll make this statement right now. If we need to get a conditional use permit, I will pay the permit fee, and I'll even pay Mr. Billings here to file it. But I don't think that that's what the intended use is. Thank you.
Just a minute. Does any commissioner have a question? Mr. Billings.
No, sir, thank you. No.
Thank you, ma'am.
Michael Other.
Gotta get my knees under me.
Take your time.
My name is Mike Other. I live at 725 Winter Haven, Frankfort, Kentucky, 40601. Good evening, Commissioner, lawyers, Mr. Tracy, others. I have lived at 725 Winter Haven for 30 years. When we first purchased the property, we were told we would have sewers in 5. We're still on septic. Now we're in concern about the property in question. If they are going to have sewers, would that also mean we would have to have sewers? Just a question. It's out there. But with Mr. Tracy buying this property, and I know he has Tracy Sand and Gravel. I've purchased items from him before. And if he wants to classify it as agriculture and then run a staging operation with all his sand and gravel and rocks and everything, with trucks coming in and out, that's not what the residents in Spring Hill want. And I, as a former construction personnel, had my own business for a while, I don't want somebody telling me what I can do with my property and my, and I can understand, Mr. Tracy. But you have to take in consideration, what do the people that are going to be impacted by this, how are they going to take that? Would you want dump trucks running through your neighborhood? Would you want heavy equipment coming through? Would you want people coming and going? Okay, we can come in Hickman Hill. I can't get out, somebody's there at Hickman Hill. I'll swing around through the neighborhood. Would you want that going on in your neighborhood? Anybody want to answer that? Because I know I didn't want it. I hope you all consider the residents and their feelings about what's going on, about what could possibly come down in the future. I thank you for your time. Any questions?
Is any planning commissioner? Mr. Billy,
Thank you, sir.
you may have.
If I understand your testimony correctly, that you're objecting to the comings and goings on that are going on today, correct?
Yes.
It bothers you all about the amount of traffic. Is that what I understand your testimony to be?
Yes.
Okay. And yet it's going on today under the current zoning as it is right now, correct?
Yes.
So you're objecting about what's going on under the existing zoning as it exists today, correct?
Correct.
No more questions.
So what else what are you getting at? What are you getting at?
I had a chance to ask me questions, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you mean I can't answer him a question?
Well, he's not testifying, but
Would you like me to answer?
Yes, I would like you to
It's
answer.
Mr. Chair. It's Mr. Chairman.
I don't care, sir.
This is not an argument between two parties. It's a proceeding to take a record so we can make an intelligible decision.
Thank you, Mr. Logan.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad everyone here heard that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Madam Secretary.
David Remfer.
I like that.
Good evening, and thank you all for your time and for your service to our region. My name is David Remfer. I'm an occupant of 2208 Autumn View Lane, Frankfurt, 2 houses down from the property in question this evening. I'm also a tenured member of the Landscape Facility Services and Snow Removal Industry, and I am familiar with Tracy Sand and Gravel. Reputable business, good people, no objection to them or to their services in general. Let that be clear. My question is, as has been repeatedly avoided tonight, is the specific use of the property coming up. To the attorney's point of the involvement of morality, when we come to the code that founded this committee, the purpose, scope, and intent of these regulations shall be to promote and protect the public health, safety, morals, convenience, and general welfare of the county, to facilitate orderly and harmonious development and other purposes. So yes, there is legal basis and it is important. With that said, the property in question, which is being sold to us, has been used for agriculture, is quite clearly seen from street view camera footage as a field of grass. The crop currently on the property was planted on the property after its time of purchase, which is in clear violation of its current RA zoning. RA does not approve field crop farms. So we already have an example that the applicant intending a rezoning of the property is disrespectful of this committee and of the zoning and of the permitted uses of the property. That doesn't inspire confidence as a community, nor does having triaxle dump trucks go within a few feet of my 3-year-old child. I understand Tracy Sand and Gravel is not liable for them. I'm very painfully familiar with indemnity and liability and that whole world that comes with snow removal. With that said, if we're permitting the use of the property for that purpose, we're also understanding that there will be an increased frequency of traffic for that purpose. And while he may not be liable for the people who come and go, the type of equipment they operate, how safely they do it, we are. And that affects our quality of life, which this committee is fully commissioned and empowered to weigh. I respectfully disagree with the attorney when he said that specific use is not in question, given the breadth of permitted uses under current AG code, as was brought up by Mr. Lusher. The specific use of the property that's intended has a tremendous impact on this committee's ability to weigh out the public health and safety. So in the absence of that specific use from such a tremendously exhaustive report, I find that it's impossible to make an appropriate weighing as to whether or not this is an acceptable rezoning.
Okay, David, if you will hold on for just a moment.
Yes, Your Honor.
Does any commissioner have questions? David? Not? Mr. Billings?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Preston? Okay.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
There are no more speakers.
Okay, at this point, there are no more individuals signed up to speak on this matter. Mr. Billings, you have 10 minutes.
Pardon me while I set my timer for 8 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, I appreciate your time for being here. I've been here, I think, about 2.5 hours now, and we've covered a lot of ground. The hearing went sort of where I thought it might be, and I sort of gave you all an overview early on that I thought you would hear comments, and you've heard a lot of comments about people's concern, primarily right now about what's going on in their neighborhood or on their streets that they allege are arising from the property. Here's the problem with this analysis and their objections. There's no evidence at all that the things they're complaining about are illegal today. There's no evidence that the things that are going on that they don't like, that they're not permitted today. All of the stuff that they have raised an objection are things that are current, valid, existing uses of public property, public rights of way, and of the property in question. So the very things of which they don't want to happen are happening today, are allowed to continue to happen if the zone change doesn't occur, and will continue to occur, or possibly continue to occur, even if you all don't approve the zone change. In other words, the complaints, and I'm not in any way being disrespectful to their concerns, because they have valid concerns as owners of what they want. The problem is, those concerns aren't voiced under the law of Kentucky, which is KRS 100.213. And the analysis for the Planning Commission is very, very clear, is you have to look at whether or not the proposed zoning is in agreement with the comprehensive plan, not the preambles to the creation of the Planning Commission, but the comprehensive plan, which is adopted in 2016. Or, in the alternative, whether the existing zoning is inappropriate, which if you listen to all of this evidence, you would say it shouldn't be allowed now, and the proposed zoning is appropriate. For example, they talked about lifestyles, how they're being impacted now. They talked about the road, the noise that the installation of the road created when it was built in the last month or 2 months. They talked about increased traffic. They talked about the dump trucks. All of these things, while they may be important to them, and I'm not in any way being disrespectful to those viewpoints and positions because they're valid to them, they are simply not relevant as to whether or not the zone change is in compliance or in agreement with the comprehensive plan. Mr. Cecil and his client spent a significant amount of time talking about the sewerability, and in his phrase, close proximity, and his trying to narrow the staff report. The staff report is in the record. You have it in front of you. The staff report conclusions are 1.5 pages long. It is not limited to one sentence. The staff report is 16 pages for a reason. It is thorough. It is exhaustive. I believe you can go farther than the staff report. But the staff report does not limit its finding to just saying that sewer is not in near proximity. And there is no evidence in the record tonight that says sewer is in close proximity. The evidence was from a finding 11 some years ago without a complete record before you all today regarding everything that was submitted or was not submitted before you. And in fact, what you have is a letter dated May 2021 from sewer that says it doesn't extend to the property and they have no plans to do that. It does not say clear proximity, it's not the same word. But when you say we have no plans to extend, it is, in my opinion, the same input, the same impetus, the same import. Sewer's not going to come to the property. Whether it's 100 feet or 500 feet or half a mile away, they don't have plans to install it. Zone changes are difficult. They're important in our system of government. They're vitally important for due process, and they're vitally important to make sure that records are created, but also that the administrative body, which hears the evidence, reviews the law under which it has to make a decision, and to review that decision within the confines of that law and not within the confines of other concerns people have, especially concerns that are expressed about problems that exist today under the existing zoning of the property. You've not heard in the last about an hour and 15 minutes or so, any arguments regarding the comprehensive plan. You didn't hear an analysis of the goals or the objectives, except for the small part about the sewer issue. Staff report is more complex and it is more complete than one line about sewerability. Staff has done an excellent job. Okay. They have visited the property. They have 3 different staff members have worked on this report. And it is a difficult decision. I'm not envious. I've served on 2 public boards in Lexington, and I'm never envious of having done that, of boards having to make these decisions, because they're not easy. I think you asked me the question towards the end earlier about, if this is such a simple zone change, why are you here, Mr. Billings, to make this complex and thorough presentation? So let me end with this. I'm here tonight because this is actually a continuation of prior hearings where it was very clear, although it could be a simple zone change, this right here shows you it's not a simple process. It's complex. It's important to people on both sides of it. And those people are entitled to hire attorneys to come and to make arguments and presentation, which we do our best job. He's done his best job, and the people who spoke did their best job. So I don't want to in any way minimize the effort that I've put in, Mr. Cecil put in, or than anyone else. But while I think some zone changes may be simple, and in my mind they should be adopted, I also understand that they're complex. And when I'm hired by a client, my belief is do the job thoroughly, and I try to do my best. So it's not meant to make your life harder tonight or to make you stay here longer, but it's to do my job, which is to present the evidence under KRS 100-213 that shows the zone change, for numerous reasons outlined in staff report and in my presentation and testimony, is appropriate under the comprehensive plan. And even if not, the current zoning is inappropriate for reasons set forth, and that the proposed zoning is appropriate. And with respect to that, we have a motion in front of you. Staff has also recommended as a condition of approval that the revised plat be filed of record, and the applicant is in agreement with that condition. That plat is an attachment in the appendices that staff has given to you. If you want to review it, we are in agreement that that will be recorded in the county clerk's office as an agricultural division plat, should this zone change be approved. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the Commission's attention to a difficult issue, to a weighty issue, and appreciate your consideration. And I thank you in advance for voting to adopt the zone change. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for letting us make our presentation today. Again, I will say Mr. Billings and I are in agreement on the law, which is the first issue is whether or not the proposed zoning is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. We put on evidence that it's not, but also the staff, in their staff report on page 6, says specifically it is not. It also states that the current zoning of R8 is in compliance and has been for years with the comprehensive plan. So that knocks that issue, in my mind, out as far as a legal reason to rezone. Then what you're left with is whether or not the current zoning is appropriate or inappropriate. And the reason we focused so much on the utilities and the facilities is because that's what the staff used in their report to make the determination that the current zoning is inappropriate. We have all of the other factors, but this is the one that was focused on to determine whether or not the rezoning should go forward. And again, Mr. Billings mentioned the 2010 report from the staff, from Franklin County staff. We've attached that. That report, when it deals with the facilities, specifically states that this site is located in an existing residential, near an existing residential development, Spring Hill subdivision, and in close proximity to Duckers. The staff in that report in 2010 also found the utility responses have been attached. Based on the facility assessment, it appears that the public facilities are in the area and the property could be served by these facilities. This was a finding of a finding by the staff, adopted by this planning commission. I've heard no evidence at all that anything has changed from that time to today. And I know Mr. Billings has provided a motion with findings of fact. I would like to make a counter to that, a counter motion, and I would ask that you adopt the findings of fact that are on page 10 of the 2000 staff report. Those say the comprehensive plan, future land use plan designates the property for suburban residential neighborhood, which it does. Single-family residential land uses are indicated in the comprehensive plan to be appropriate uses for the suburban residential neighborhood land use designation. The rural residential A zone district is an appropriate zone district for the suburban residential neighborhood land use designation. And finally, 4, utilities are available to serve the site. Those were the conclusions in the staff report 2010. For that, based upon these, the rezoning should be disapproved because the current zoning is appropriate. And those are the only reasons in this case that the rezoning could go forward. Staff finds that the comprehensive plan, the use is not in line with the comprehensive plan, and the determination of it being inappropriate flies in the face of the current staff report, but also isn't backed up by the information in the staff report. As a final comment, I didn't get to say this earlier, looking at the allowed uses, principal permitted uses in ag, there are 2 things that were not mentioned. I just kind of give this for food for thought. Automobile services, and then also trailer rentals. So those are principal permitted uses in the ag zone. So there are some things there, again, that deal with some of the concerns of the neighbors about the allowed uses in the ag zone. And again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I should have a minute to, may I address one comment that Mr. Cecil said?
That's the opinion of the chair. If you ask me, you're not gonna like what I say.
Do you mind putting it in an email and sending it to staff? At
We're
this,
gonna keep doing rebuttal on
at
arguments.
this moment, I
On
make
this statement.
the following motion. I move that the item be tabled, the public hearing be closed, that a summary be made of the testimony tonight, and that the item be placed on the agenda of the next available planning commission meeting for action. And the next available planning commission meeting is not August 12th. We've already advertised that.
I'll second that.
Moved and properly second. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. There being none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lusher?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Chairman Jackson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And before we do the motion to adjourn, please be prepared at the August 12th meeting to go into executive session to discuss legal stuff. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I make a I wanted to do it.
Do it.
I second it.
Meeting adjourned.
I made the motion, he seconded.
Come to